What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here. And while it's been about a year since some of us have seen the 2024 core rules, I realized I had started this process and never truly finished it. And actually, when I'd started it, we were only able to go off of Unearthed Arcana, and we actually couldn't even showcase things on screen because of different rules and things. So, what I'm going to be talking about now in this new or continued updated series, depending on how you want to look at it, is the 2024 classes. So this is everything that's going to be in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and then we're also going to do those Tales of the Valiant comparisons. Now, previously, my goal was to run through the entirety of the Player's Handbook and then the entirety of Tales of the Valiant. I'm going to skip doing it that way and then go one to one, right? So, Player's Handbook Barbarian, Player's Handbook, or sorry, Tales of the Valiant Barbarian, and then a third video kind of doing a side-by-side comparison and give you my opinions on both. So that way, if you just want to know what the Player's Handbook Barbarian is in 2024, you'll know. You want to know what the Tales of the Valiant one is, you'll know. And then you want to see my opinions and thoughts as a comparison, you can see that as well. It's also been about a year since we've been playing and transitioned into using these 2024 rules. So I thought it's a good time now to kind of revisit and maybe things we thought were useless or not very powerful or whatever back last year, we now have more game time with them to see how we, feel about it. And I've been running two different games in 2024 and playing in two different 2024 games. So I have a pretty good sample size with people playing a variety of different classes to get an idea, myself included, what I like and what I don't like, and what maybe seems not great on paper, but then actually is pretty cool when you actually get a chance to take a look at it. So, by the way, if you like this kind of content, aside from news coverage and the other things I do here on the channel, consider subscribing. Small click for you does a whole bunch for me. We also have a bunch of new merch options down as well, so keep an eye out for that. But let's go ahead and take a look at the 2024 Barbarian. So here it is on D&D Beyond. I pulled up over here the 2014 Barbarian just in case we need to do any sort of comparisons, but for the most part, a lot of the stuff that you got in 2014, you have in 2024. If not exactly the same, there are some small tweaks. The only one I can really think of that is a true adjustment is the way brutal critical is handled. But what you see here, all the core stuff is pretty much the same. What you will notice, however, is weapon mastery is added, right? Because that's a new thing that is covered in, added in 2024, which, by the way, I want to do a follow-up video on weapon mastery because, just kind of what I think, what are the most powerful options, having seen, which ones have I not seen in play at all, if any, things like that. One thing you may notice is you cap out at a maximum of 6 rages in 2024, whereas in 2014, at 20th level, you had unlimited rages. That is probably small time stuff in the grand scheme of things. So I don't think that's like a huge deal because of the way you have recovery mechanics for rage now that you did not have previously. So let's talk about rage, right? This is the fundamental mechanic, the kind of core class mechanic of the barbarian. It does pretty much everything you knew it to do back in 2014 with a couple of notable exceptions. So it says you get that resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. You get that extra rage damage bonus, which you can see is 2 to 4, which is the same. However, it says when you make an attack using strength. Now, that's important to note because if you use a thrown weapon is an attack using strength. This was previously being able to do sort of thrown weapons and get the rage damage bonus was a function of the giant barbarian specifically. That was one of their unique aspects that's now kind of been folded into the base barbarian. So that aspect of if you were playing, like if you're doing a 2014 subclass in the giant barbarian with the 2024 base class, you kind of lose out a little bit on that because that part of your mechanic doesn't really fit in anymore. But either way, the aspect of it returning to your hand is still something, unique. But anyway, You get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and you can't maintain concentration. You can't cast spells. That's all pretty much the same kind of stuff. The difference was I think it was a melee attack using strength in 2014. If we were to scroll down and look, yeah, melee weapon attack using strength. Here it is now making an attack using strength. The difference is, though, previously it was a 1-minute duration. It has been adjusted now to be a 10-minute duration. The thought process behind this being you might be able to may want to use rage out of combat for the advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and then maybe that rolls into combat. You have that benefit. Also, previously, if you were not attacked or did not attack somebody else, you would lose your rage on a subsequent turn. It has been given, you've been given options to extend your rage, right? If it's active at the end of your turn, you can extend it. It'll be automatically extended if you make an attack roll against an enemy. If you force that enemy to make a saving throw, so this could be something through like a grapple or a shove, or just take a bonus action to extend your rage. If you happen to be in a situation where you're unable to make an attack, whether that's, again, it's an attack roll against an enemy, right? So that could be a ranged attack roll, consider that, or a thrown weapon. But if you're unable to do that, you can just choose to use a bonus action to extend your rage, so that way you don't drop it. Again, it lasting for 10 minutes means it's likely going to cover you for the entirety of any combat that you're in, and you only lose rage if you don heavy armor or have the incapacitated condition. Here, it was if you are knocked unconscious. So things can grant you the incapacitated condition. So if you were to have that, then you would drop your rage. So typically you are incapacitated if you are unconscious all the time, but there may be things that can give you the incapacitated condition, maybe certain abilities or spells or something. But yeah. So rage is largely the same with the small number of quality of life improvements like the ability to extend it and the 10-minute rage time, which is good because you're never going to have to worry about running out of rages in a singular combat, which also might help to play into the fact that you have not, a finite number of rages per long rest, because, they're going to last the entire combat. Unarmored defense remains the same. It's 10 plus your dexterity plus your constitution modifier. You can still use a shield. Another thing I will mention is I've seen this come up a lot. Barbarians can wear armor. I feel like people know this because they've played Baldur's Gate 3, but I have seen a lot of people still under the impression that barbarians cannot wear armor of any kind. That is unequivocally not true. Monks don't have any mechanics or armor training in any way, so monks, to get access to their unarmored defense, can't wear armor. But barbarians, as you can see, can wear light and medium armor and use shields. So consider that. Now, again, depending on what your ability scores are, if you rolled or however you determine them, you may be more, it may, at least for a while, until you're maybe able to get other items or maybe get some ability score improvements, it may actually benefit you to be a barbarian wearing medium armor. You might have a higher AC than you would have unarmored. I've played in games where people lock so hard into this that they don't realize that, like, they had literally a 12 dexterity or a 12 constitution and a 10 dexterity. So their armor class was 11. And I was like, you could be sitting at 15 if you just put on half plate, or something like that. Obviously, if you want to live the unarmored fantasy, you obviously can do that, but you know that you're likely going to get hit. And while people may say barbarians have a ton of hit points, they have the D12 hit point, they're supposed to get hit. Fair, but it's still okay for you to get missed so that you have, you can tank in multiple ways. You don't have to tank just as a sack of hit points. You can tank as a sack of hit points with a decent AC, so maybe you can stay in that fight a little bit longer. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I do know a lot of people seem to think barbarians are incapable of wearing armor. And more importantly, again, unarmored defense does allow you to use shield, or a shield, rather. And this is a question I have for all of you. I have never in my time seen a barbarian use a single-handed weapon and a shield. Maybe you guys have, maybe you've played one yourself, but in every game I've ever played with a barbarian, they are always using a two-handed weapon. Now, some of them aren't using great axes and mauls or great swords. I have seen a polearm-based Barbarian, right, where they were doing the polearm master build, but everybody seems to be wielding two-handed weapons. I've never encountered a Barbarian who wielded a single-handed weapon and a shield. So, just curious what your experience has been. And then again, now we also have access to weapon mastery starting at level 1. You get 2 weapon masteries, and then when you finish a long rest, you can change those, and you get additional options as you level up. Danger Sense here comes online at level 2. It is now just advantage on dexterity saving throws unless you're incapacitated. Previously, it was tied to like things you could see. Now it's just if as long as you're, conscious and able to not be incapacitated, advantage on dex saves. That's also a little bit easier and more streamlined. Reckless attack functions exactly as it always has. When you make your first attack roll on your turn, if you do so, you can choose to decide to attack recklessly. If you do so, it gives you advantage on attack rolls using strength until the start of your next turn, but attack rolls against you also have advantage. And it is again until the start of your next turn. So remember this, because this is something I feel like people forget. You reckless attack. Doing so gives you advantage on attack rolls using strength until the start of your next turn. Meaning, if somebody triggers an opportunity attack from you before the start of your next turn, it is still a reckless attack because you have advantage on attack rolls using strength until the start of your next turn. Therefore, any off time, before your turn starts, you have advantage. So your opportunity attacks do have advantage. But again, any attacks against you have advantage as well. Something that I do feel like gets overlooked a lot is the fact that those attacks are reckless kind of on off turn before your next turn starts. Also, just something I like to throw out there, if you can snag yourself a cloak of displacement as a barbarian, this means that your attacks would be advantage and the enemies would just have straight rolls as opposed to having advantage because, the cloak of displacement offsets that a little bit. But anyway, subclass comes online at 3rd level. That's no different for 2014 as they got their subclasses at 3rd level as well. And then primal knowledge, this is, I think this is sort of baked in to some degree. There was some Xanathars or Tasha stuff, but this kind of got a little bit of a tweak. You gain proficiency in another skill of your choice from the Barbarian list. So that Barbarian list, if we were to scroll up, is animal handling, athletics, intimidation, nature, perception, or survival. So you get 2 of those. At level 3, you're going to get an extra one. This is a nice little quality of life thing, again, giving you a little bit more skill access. But more importantly, while you're raging, you can use strength in place of the traditional ability score for any of those: acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival. Again, there's some funny kind of mechanics as to maybe how you want to think about that, but you can be so angry you see things better. Or you could be so angry you hide better, because that's technically how that works. So, with primal knowledge, while raging, you can use strength in place of any of the traditional ability scores for acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival. Now, reminder, while you're raging, you have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, which means while raging, these can all be considered strength checks, which means all of those will be at advantage. So as a raging barbarian, you can make advantage on athletics checks, acrobatics checks, intimidation checks, perception checks, stealth checks, and survival checks, which also lends itself to the concept of you using the 10-minute duration for your rage outside of combat. Obviously, we know rage is primarily designed to be a combat-specific ability, but if I'm going to be tracking enemies through the woods or trying to stealth through something, technically, which is kind of wild to think about, if I'm trying to stealth and I'm doing like a series of stealth encounters, I could rage, use my bonus action every turn, even though we're not technically in combat, to extend my rage, turn my stealth checks into strength checks, and have advantage on all of my stealth checks for the next 10 minutes while I sneak around using my bonus action to extend my rage. All right. Ability score improvements, that's standard. Extra attack, standard. Fast movement, the same, right? An extra 10 feet of movement while you're not wearing heavy armor. Feral instinct, advantage on initiative rolls, that's all the same. There was a caveat that you couldn't be, it used to be, I think you couldn't be surprised if you raged at the start of your turn or something along those lines. Basically, the way surprise has been shifted in 2024 is surprise just means disadvantage on initiative rolls. So anything that would allow you to ignore, um, being surprised or things like that, typically now is granting you advantage on your initiative rolls. The thought process being, even if you're still surprised, your roll for initiative is a straight roll now, as opposed to a disadvantage roll, meaning you'll likely still get to act normally as you would on your turn. There is no more surprise rounds or things of that nature, which, as we know from Baldur's Gate 3, can basically end a fight before it even begins if you manage to get surprise on an enemy. That's no longer a thing. Enemies just have disadvantage, or whoever is surprised has disadvantage on their initiative. So in theory, if you roll very well while surprised, you could still go before people who were not surprised. It's just the way the dice roll. All right. And then we have Brutal Strike here at level 9. This replaces what was once Brutal Critical. If you recall, Brutal Critical used to be when you make an attack roll and you crit, you would add an additional die. So normally you would say, okay, if I'm rolling with a great sword, I would roll 2d6. When I crit, I would double the dice, so I'd have 4d6. This would add a fifth d6 onto that. The problem and the concept behind it, and having talked to the developers at various points over the years, as well as in the various interviews and things that they've done, is this is a really cool ability, but it might not ever come into play. The concept being, if you happen to just roll poorly or not crit very often on your attack rolls, a whole aspect of your class is locked behind a 5% chance on a die roll. Now, granted, you could maybe reckless attack to increase the chances of you possibly rolling that natural 20, but there's no guarantee you will, and then you have an entire class feature locked behind something that you might not ever use. So, what they've done is remove that option that once was Brutal Critical and replaced it with Brutal Strike, which is if you reckless attack, so as you normally would, you can forgo any advantage on one strength-based attack roll of your choice on your turn. The chosen attack roll mustn't have disadvantage. If that attack roll hits, you're going to deal an extra d10 damage, and you're going to do an extra effect. So it has been previously in Unearthed Arcana, you could basically give up advantage on both of your attacks to do two things. Now it is one attack roll on your turn. So if you want, you can attack. If you hit, you can deal an extra d10 damage of whatever the weapon's damage type was, or the unarmed strike. And then do an additional thing here, right? You could do Forceful Blow, which the target is pushed 15 feet straight away from you. And then you can move up to half your speed straight towards that creature without provoking attacks of opportunity. This has great concepts for, it doesn't say they have to be pushed 15 feet away onto something that supports them. You could knock somebody off a cliff with this. Also, there's nothing saying that this doesn't combo within a weapon that has the push ability. So you might be able to push people even further using a push weapon as well as Forceful Blow. It also, you get to move without provoking attacks of opportunity. A lot of people are thinking about this of you knocking an enemy away and then closing the distance to follow up on them, possibly pushing an enemy out of the range of an ally, or maybe put them in a more advantageous position for ranged weaponry or spell casting. You push them away, then you close the distance to them so that you're kind of keeping them there. And then obviously you could also just do that. Well, you can only do it once per turn. But if you have a pushing weapon, you could hit them again and then push them with that as well. So there's an opportunity for really move stuff around the battlefield pretty significantly. But you also could hit them this way and then provoke without provoking attacks of opportunity. You could move the other direction. And remember that initial half your movement speed, which is probably going to be around 40 because of the fact you have fast movement at this point, is 20 feet the other direction, let's say, without provoking attack of opportunity, potentially moving you away from the enemies. And then you might still have your full set of movement normally, having an additional 40 feet, let's say. So you could knock somebody this way, and then you run this way to maybe shift things around, or maybe to escape, or whatever the case may be. Or you could do a hamstring blow. The target's speed is reduced by 15 feet until the start of your next turn. They can't be affected by more than one at a time, though, only the most recent one. But if you have a topple weapon, let's say, you could cut their movement feet by 15 feet and knock them prone, potentially, if they fail that saving throw with a topple weapon. And now they're prone, meaning they're going to have to use half their movement speed to stand back up. And that movement speed is already cut by 15 feet. So they basically have almost no movement at that point. Or if you have a slowing weapon, potentially you could slow them again, slow their movement speed and hamstring them at the same time. I think effectively cutting their movement speed down by 25 feet. So there's a lot of options here. Also, note that Brutal Strike is a die of a d10. If you crit on that strike, the Brutal Strike damage also would, in theory, double to be 2d10 on that, which is a pretty significant amount, which 1d10 is about the amount of extra damage you'd be doing if you were to say, and it's again, let's see, you forgo your advantage. Okay, at the so you don't get to do it after you hit. You have to say, I'm going to use I'm reckless attacking. I'm going to use brutal strike. So the chance your brutal strike could miss. But realistically, right, like we said, the highest damage die you can roll is a d12 with like a great axe or something. So brutal critical would have done at most an extra d12 of damage. Now you're dealing pretty close to that in a d10 of damage, which could turn into 2d10 if you manage to crit, and you get the concept of forceful blow or hamstring blow on top of this. So while brutal critical was a great, powerful option that was just sort of an always on thing, which was nice when it worked. This does give you more variability and more usability just regularly throughout combat. All right, level 11, you get Relentless Rage. If you drop to 0 hit points while your rage is active and you don't die outright, you can make a D10 Constitution saving throw, or sorry, DC 10 Constitution saving throw. If you succeed, your hit points instead change to a number equal to twice your Barbarian level. Previously, you would just go to 1 hit point. So when you get this at level 11, you're going to get 22 hit points back, which is not a lot, but if you are raging, right, you don't drop your rage because you were raging and you don't actually go to 0 and become incapacitated. You would go to 1 instead, maintaining that rage. So potentially that 22 hit points could persist longer depending on the type of damage that you're taking. And then each time after the first that you use this, the DC increases by 5. When you finish a short or long rest, that DC resets back down to 10. I also like that it's when you finish a short or long rest. I don't believe that was the case previously. Oh no, it was. Okay, so it does reset on a short rest, which is nice because that means obviously if you have a really harrowing fight and you manage to eke out a short rest or maybe get something like a prayer of healing or something in there, which will give you the benefits of a short rest, you can go ahead and reset that DC um back down to 10. So, let's see. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope. Okay. Then we get at level 13 improved Brutal Strike. You have honed your new ways to attack furiously. So we've added 2 options. So we have the way Brutal Strike we already covered works. We're adding additional options to that. Staggering Blow. The target has disadvantage on the next saving throw it makes, and it can't make opportunity attacks until the start of your next turn. This is pretty useful because you could possibly set them up for a pretty nasty combo with a Staggering Blow, allowing you to provide disadvantage on a saving throw, maybe allowing your caster to follow up on the next turn with some sort of save or suck option or severe damage move, something like that. Or Sundering Blow before the start of your next turn. The next attack roll made by another creature against that target gains a +5 bonus to the roll. An attack roll can only gain 1 Sundering Blow bonus. This is the one that I'm least excited about. Like, you're giving an ally a +5 bonus to the roll. That's okay. But this one's kind of, I think that one's kind of useless. Staggering Blow is more beneficial. And again, it can't make opportunity attacks until the start of your next turn, which means not only can you set up a caster for a really powerful move, or maybe even another marshal or somebody with a really good saving throw based ability, it also allows people to freely move around them without having to worry about the opportunity attacks. All right. At level 15, you get Persistent Rage. Now, this is sort of why I think to some degree we're not seeing unlimited rages. Not only the fact that the timing for rage is longer, as well as the ability to just extend it, we have Persistent Rage. At level 15, when you roll initiative, you regain all expended uses of rage. This is a once per long rest ability, but that means that, at level 15, let's see how many rage uses you have. At level 15, you have 5 uses. That's the same as it is for 2014 Barbarian. And remember, 2014 Barbarian, actually, they get them down. Is it at 12 here as well? Yeah. So 2014 Barbarian has the limited number of rages until level 20, and that's it. You here as a 2024 Barbarian have longer rage time, the ability to extend it without worrying about attack rolls, and at level 15, when you get roll, and it's when you roll initiative too. So, like, if you're getting into combat and you're like, I don't know, boom, all your rage is back, all 5 of them back, which does, again, incentivize you to potentially, at higher levels, use rage outside of combat to allow you to do, other benefit things like we talked about with using strength for those other checks for, like, having advantage on stealth and things. So roll initiative, get all your rages back. That's a once per long rest, but you could potentially, with this, have 10 rages in the course of one long rest or one full day, which is pretty nuts. In addition, your rage now lasts for 10 minutes regardless. You don't need to extend it. If it ends early, if you have the unconscious condition, not just the incapacitated condition, or if you don heavy armor. So let's see. The unconscious condition gives you incapacitated. Previously, it was just incapacitated. Now, if you're unconscious, it ends as well. But it's now lasting turn per turn. You can have full access to your bonus action now if you want to do something unique. Maybe if you have a multi-class or something, or you want to do an interesting bonus action option. I don't know. But you're not having to worry about finding a way to extend it. And again, it's just lasting that full amount, and you're going to get them all back once per long rest, which is pretty solid. At level 17, you get improved Brutal Strike, which that Brutal Strike die now increases to 2d10, making it pretty much at this point almost out damage what Brutal Critical would have done. In addition, you can use 2 different Brutal Strike effects whenever you use your Brutal Strike feature. This is nuts. Think about what you could do. You can combo any 2 of these. All right. I could now, if I crit, or if I'm not if I crit, if I just hit you with one, I'm reckless attacking, I'm sacrificing advantage to try to hit you. If I do, I can now tack on an extra 2d10 damage, 4d10 if I happen to crit on this, and I could hamstring blow and forceful blow on the same swing, meaning I can knock you 15 feet away. I can move half my movement speed without provoking attacks of opportunity. And then I can also cut your movement speed by 15 feet. So potentially, I knocked you 15 feet away and knocked 15 feet off of your movement. If the party's able to move, we potentially could have put you in a situation where you are dashing only to get close to us. Now, one thing I think it says you can use 2 different. Okay, so 2 different. You couldn't like forceful blow, and knock somebody back 30 feet. But again, remember, this is comboing with all of these things we've talked about with any weapon mastery properties you might have. I believe the Maul is topple, which is they make a constitution saving throw or get knocked prone. You could, in theory, forceful blow, hamstring blow, topple, meaning you knock them back 15 feet, you cut their movement speed by 15 feet, and you knock them prone. You could basically bounce ping pong people around the battlefield with something like that and just shut it down completely. Or, I could knock somebody away and then also make it a staggering blow so that my ally can get advantage, they'll have disadvantage on the next saving throw they can make. And maybe by pushing them 15 feet away, they're now in a more advantageous position for purposes of spellcasting. Indomitable Might at level 18. This one, this ability, it was really good in the one playtest where you got it. One Unearthed Arcana, you got this a lot earlier. But it is, if your total for a strength check or strength saving throw is less than your strength score, that's the actual total number, you can use that in place of it, right? So let's say at level 18, your barbarian has a 20 strength. If you roll any strength check or saving throw and the number comes up on that die less than number 20, you would just use that again. I will point out that this is not when you're raging. This is just any strength check or strength saving throw. So strength saving throw, athletics check. But if you are raging, all of these things here from Primal Knowledge, which could become strength checks, acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival, those can all become strength checks, which means at level 18, the lowest you could roll on any of those checks would be the total of your strength score. At level 19, you get an epic boon like everybody else. And then at level 20, you get Primal Champion. Your strength and constitution score increase by 4, and their maximum is now 25. So if you happen to be a level 20 Barbarian and your strength happens to be 24, that would mean the lowest you could roll while raging on a strength check, an athletics check, acrobatics, intimidation, and so on could be 24. So that is the entire base Barbarian. We've covered all of that. Let's move on to the subclasses. We're obviously going to skip Path of the Muscle Wizard. That is a Mage Hand Press thing, but they seem to have tacked it on here because it was formulated in a way to be used with the 2024 rules. So, Path of the Berserker. I have one of these in one of the games that I'm running. If you use Reckless Attack while your rage is active, you deal extra damage to the first target you hit on your turn with a strength-based attack. To determine the extra damage, roll a number of d6 equal to your rage damage bonus and add them together. The damage is the same type as the weapon or unarmed strike used. So again, you're going to be using this rage damage line here, which is going to be a total of 2d6 up to a maximum of 4d6 here at level 16. But again, they are dice, which means that they do extra damage, which means they can crit and double those dice. Which means if you are a Berserker Barbarian and you're using Brutal Strike at higher levels, you could be dealing, if you're like, what do we say, level 17 Berserker Barbarian, and you roll to attack, you're going to do your normal damage. In addition to that, you're going to do 4 extra d6 damage for the Frenzy, and potentially an extra 2d10 for the Brutal Strike. And again, those numbers can double if you crit to an 8d6 for the Frenzy and 4d10 for the Brutal Strike. It is only a once per turn thing, but it is free extra damage. A lot of us did like the extra attack option that the Frenzy Barbarian had, but it also had a pretty significant offset of granting you levels of exhaustion. And the way exhaustion works in 2024, that could get pretty significant pretty quickly. So instead of that, they said, what do you normally do as a Berserker? You want to do more damage by doing an extra attack. We're just going to give you guaranteed extra damage. You're probably going to be reckless attacking anyway. You're just going to add this on. A thing that I've done in my games is I've added the rage damage in addition to the frenzy dice. So like if they're level 5, they do 2d6. I'm having them do 2d6 plus 2 just to give a little bit extra on that. But either way, it's not, I still like the extra attack that the original frenzied barbarian berserker had, because that had another opportunity to crit, which could obviously spike the damage pretty significantly. But again, this is something they can do every turn as long as they're reckless attacking, granting them the opportunity to increase that damage consistently without having to, get some pretty severe negative offset. At level 6, you have immunity to the charmed and frightened condition while you're raging. If you are charmed or frightened before you enter a rage, it ends on you. So it's not suspended, it's just ended on you, which is nice. Retaliation here at level 10. When you take damage from a creature that's within 5 feet of you, you can use a reaction to make 1 melee attack against that creature. That's great. That's constant reaction use. You're probably going to be in the face of everybody anyway. If they hit you, actually, if you take damage from them, so they don't even have to hit you with an attack. You could, if they're within 5 feet of you, and they hit you with like a spell or something or an AoE and you happen to be close to them, you can use a reaction to make it. Just has to be the creature dealing the damage to you is the one you need to hit. So they obviously just have to be within range. At level 14, you get Intimidating Presence. As a bonus action, you can strike terror into others with a menacing presence and primal power. When you do so, each creature of your choice in a 30-foot emanation originating from you must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, a creature that has the frightened condition for 1 minute. At the end of each of the frightened creature's turn, the creature repeats the save, ending it on a success. Now notice that it doesn't say that it ends if you damage them. So as long as they're frightened for a minute, or anything like this. Sometimes if you damage creatures when they have like a status effect, it can end it. They're still frightened of you. They get to make the save at the end of each of their turns, which is kind of a bummer. And then you can use this feature once. You can't use it again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend a use of your rage to restore it. I don't like this, that it's still a bonus action. I think that's kind of dumb. I think it should be when you activate your rage, you can choose to use Intimidating Presence. Or it just happens when you activate your rage. I think that that's fine. We've seen other abilities like the Vow of Enmity for the Vengeance Paladin used to be a bonus action to mark somebody with your Vow of Enmity. It's now, as part of the attack that you make, you can choose to mark them. So it's not actually eating up any of your action economy. It's just part of the attack. I kind of like the visual of like you're going into the rage and it's so intimidating that it actually sends out this shockwave of intimidation. And then because you have to expend your rage to use it again, like it just being tied to whenever you rage, makes sense to me. I guess the concept of this is if you're not in a when you activate your rage, if there's not enough enemies within 30 feet of you, it kind of is a waste of an ability. Whereas if it's a bonus action, you can choose to use it strategically. So I understand the concept of why it's a bonus action and not just an auto happened thing. But I like the visual of it happening more when you rage. Or maybe you could just say as a bonus action or part of your rage, or something like that. Because right now you don't actually have to be raging to use Intimidating Presence. You can just do it without entering into a rage. I might just add that actually might be the better qualification is as a bonus action, and then something along the lines of or as part of the bonus action used when you rage or something like that. You could do this. So that way, if your rage go to use your rage, you don't have to spend 2 bonus actions, or you said 2 turns to be able to do this. You can do it as part of the rage, or you can do it, on a subsequent turn if you need to position or something like that. That would be the fix that I would add to it. All right. And again, like I said, I have one in one of my games, and I am enjoying seeing him play it. The extra damage is nice. It's just he needs to remember to reckless attack and then do that. But the only downside is you have to reckless attack, which means I am getting advantage on him pretty consistently. But I guess that's sort of the fantasy of the Berserker, right? Or Path of the Wildheart. This is the updated, what once was the Totem Warrior Barbarian. Got a little bit of updates here. So Animal Speaker here at level 3. Beast Sense and Speak with Animals as rituals. Nothing crazy there. I think that's the same. Rage of the Wild at level 3. Whenever you activate your rage, you gain one of the following options. For Bear, you have resistance to every damage type except Force, Necrotic, Psychic, and Radiant. This kind of tracks with the updates we've seen where like they're kind of avoiding things that are magical for the purposes of overcoming damage resistance. They allow them to do one of these 4 damage types typically, which is their more like highly resisted or not highly resisted damage types, I guess. So Bear gives you resistance to everything else other than those 4 damage types. Also gives you the opportunity if you decide to play something like an Azamar Barbarian, where you get resistance to or you get, I think it's resistance to radiant and necrotic damage as an Azamar. You can pretty much get yourself almost to full resistance while raging. Eagle, when you activate your rage, you can take the dash or disengage action as part of that bonus action. While your rage is active, you can take a bonus action to do both of those actions. This is what I was kind of just talking about before, something along this wording for Intimidating Presence, right? So when you activate your rage, you can take the disengage and dash actions as part of that bonus action, which is great. Getting both of those, disengage and dash, is going to give you a ton of movement. And then again, while you're raging, you can use a bonus action to take both of those at the same time. Getting that extra movement without provoking attacks of opportunity is pretty nuts. Or Wolf, while your rage is active, your allies have advantage on attack rolls against enemies of yours within 5 feet of you. So again, they don't need to be. Your allies have advantage on attack rolls against any enemy of yours within 5 feet of you. So you can get yourself right in the thick of it. And then any enemy that's within 5 feet of you, your allies have advantage. It's essentially like a ranged, almost like pack tactics, which could be very powerful if you have a rogue in the party to get themselves sneak attack pretty consistently. All right, at level 6, you gain one of the following options, and you can when you finish a long rest, you can change it, which is nice. You can choose Owl to get dark vision out to 60 feet, or an additional 60 feet of dark vision if you already have it. Panther gives you a climb speed, and Salmon gives you a swim speed. So obviously you can change that out on a long rest to match whatever fits your situation best at the time. Nature Speaker is you can cast Commune with Nature as a ritual. which is great for level 10. And then lastly, Power of the Wilds at level 14. Falcon, while your rage is active, you have a fly speed equal to your speed if you aren't wearing any armor. Also, they've removed any concept of you falling at the end of your turn. You can just fly while you're raging, which is great. Lion, while your rage is active, any of your enemies within 5 feet of you have disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you or another barbarian who has this option active, meaning that, like, hey, fight me and then leave my allies alone, which is nice. Or Ram, while your rage is active, you can cause a larger, smaller creature to have the prone condition when you hit it with a melee attack. Again, notice for Ram, there is no saving throw. You can just knock larger, smaller creatures prone if you hit them. Again, remember all the concepts we talked about with Brutal Strike and the concept of knocking people back and cutting movement speeds. You could combo that with Ram, and then maybe some other, maybe if you have like a slowing weapon or a cleave weapon, something like that. Because again, it's when you hit them. So if you have a weapon that has cleave where I can hit you, and then I can hit you, I can knock both of them prone if they're larger or smaller, and then one of them could be affected by the brutal strike. So a lot of good options here. They also changed the name to, because they said like a lot of it said like bear, eagle, wolf for all of them. And they said in 2014, a lot of people didn't realize you could pick and choose from each. You didn't have to stick bear the whole way through. So they changed it up to make it a little more obvious for the players. I think obviously bear is still exceptionally strong, but honestly, they've really ramped up eagle to give you a lot of battlefield mobility, which is also kind of wild to think about how you'd have a barbarian that's just like zipping around the battlefield, which is pretty nuts. And then again, wolf also very strong, especially as like a team player, which is kind of interesting to see. And then power of the wilds, fly is always good as a melee character, typically to get in close. Being able to just pull everybody to you, especially if you have opportunities to like, hey, come fight me. And then maybe you can do other things, lock other people down, depending on what abilities you have. And then honestly, just the auto prone from Ram is pretty solid as well. Path of the World Tree. Actually, in my Monday night game, somebody's playing Path of the World Tree. So I can talk to this as well. Your rage taps into the World Tree. When you activate your rage, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your barbarian level. So again, you start at level 3. Whenever you rage, you just get temp HP. So higher levels, level 20, whenever you rage, 20 temp HP whenever you activate your rage. It's only on the activation, but still. And then life-giving force. At the start of each of your turns while your rage is active, you can choose another creature within 10 feet of yourself to gain temporary hit points. To determine the number of temp HP, roll a number of d6s equal to your rage damage and add them together. And then they get those. So again, that's 2d6 up to 4d6 potentially at a high level, where you're getting, whenever you activate it, boom, you get hit points right at the start. And then you can grant up to 4d6 depending on the level you're at. To an ally within 10 feet, which is also a nice little, it's not 5 feet, it's 10 feet, which is nice. And then those temp HP end if the rage ends. Branches of the tree here at level 6. Whenever a creature you can see starts its turn within 30 feet of you while your rage is active, you can take a reaction to summon spectral branches of the tree around it. It must make a strength saving throw or be teleported to an unoccupied space you can see within 5 feet of yourself or in the nearest unoccupied space you can see. After the target teleports, you can reduce the target's speed to 0 at the until the end of the current turn. So again, it's whenever a creature you can see within starts its turn within 30 feet of you. So it's got to be on their turn. Their turn starts. You can use your reaction to potentially teleport them to within 5 feet of you and then cut their movement speed to 0. I will also point out that obviously we're talking about this at level 6. If you are able to do any of the nonsense we talked about with the with your weapons or your brutal strikes at other levels, like let's say you did knock them prone, right? It's their turn. Before they can stand up, you teleport them to you and cut their movement speed to 0. If they're teleported to you and their movement speed is set to 0, they cannot get up off the ground. They don't have half of their movement speed to stand up. So there's definitely an opportunity for you to knock somebody prone and then teleport them to you. And then while they're prone, they're just locked in prone because they can't do anything because their speed is 0 until the end of the current turn. So you could just potentially lock somebody down prone to allow your allies to just wail on them. Battering roots at level 10. During your turn, your reach is 10 feet greater, mind you, than with any melee weapon that has the heavier versatile property as the tendrils of the world tree extend around you. When you hit with a weapon, such a weapon on your turn, you can activate the push or topple mastery in addition to what you already have. Again, we talked about this on top of everything. So this allows you to push, which is, again, if they're larger, smaller, knock them 10 feet back. You obviously could do this with the other, the one brutal strike option, knocking somebody 25 feet back. Topple, again, as we said, allows you to knock somebody prone if they fail a constitution saving throw. There is no size limit on that, by the way. You could knock, as a small gnome barbarian, you could topple a dragon that's gargantuan in size and knock it prone, technically, because as long as it fails the saving throw, but it's not limited to the size here. And then again, this gives you a ton of versatility because it allows you to do this in addition to whatever the weapon normally would have. So, like, I might go, okay, I'm going to cleave. I'm going to use my, what is it, great axe. I'm going to hit you, deal damage. Then I'm going to use cleave on the great axe to hit this person. And then I can do another one. You can like switch, mix and match how you want to do things. Which I really like. And again, you're getting the extension of the range 10 feet greater than what it already is, which is pretty nice. And then lastly, travel along the tree at level 14. When you activate your rage, and as a bonus action while your rage is active, you can teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. In addition, once per rage, you can increase this range of that teleport to 150 feet. When you do so, you can also bring up to 6 willing creatures who are within 10 feet of you. Each creature teleports to an unoccupied space of your choice within 10 feet of your destination space. So again, as a bonus action on each of your turns, on top of the turn when you activate it, you can just get a free 60-foot teleport. This works outside of, it's not magical, it's not a spell, so you don't have to worry about it conflicting with you being raging. It also is double the distance of Misty Step, so you're getting a 60-foot teleport. And then again, once per that rage, you can make a big long teleport and bring allies with you. Again, potentially giving you the reason to want to maybe use this outside of combat. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do here. I originally was pretty lukewarm on Path of the World Tree. I think it's probably because Vitality of the Tree just didn't really call to me. And granted, temp HP is nice, but seeing branches of the tree in action in my game changed my opinion on it quite a bit. And then realizing how much this stuff can synergize with other things, pretty nice. And lastly, one of my personal favorites here is Path of the Zealot, which is at level 3, you get Divine Fury. Once on each of your turns while your rage is active, the first creature you hit with a weapon or an unarmed strike takes extra damage equal to a d6 plus half your barbarian level rounded down. And you can choose necrotic or radiant damage each time you do it. Now, I like this because it is only, unfortunately, the first creature you hit, so you can't do this more than once. It is kind of similar in nature to Path of the Berserker. Path of the Berserker starts off at 2d6 and scales up to 4d6. This starts off as a d6 plus 1 and then scales up to a maximum of a d6 plus 10 with Divine Fury. I do like the static numbers. Static numbers are nice. You don't have to worry about potentially rolling a 1 on that d6. It is also only once per turn, but it gets the benefit of Necrotic or Radiant, which might allow you to bypass some resistances in some way. And it also is not tied to you doing a reckless attack. It is, however, tied to you raging, but still, it's kind of just an always on thing as long as you remember that, oh, hey, I do extra damage to the first person I hit. And then you get Warrior of the Gods, which is a big update from its original version, but you have a pool of 4d12s that you can spend to heal yourself. As a bonus action, you can expend dice from the pool, roll them, and regain a number of hit points equal to the total. You regain all expended dice when you finish a long rest, and the number of dice increases as you level up to 5 dice at level 6, 6 dice at level 12, and 7 dice at level 17. So potentially at level 17, you can sling 7 D12 to just heal yourself as a bonus action. Again, that's a pretty powerful thing. It's not as good as something like a Paladin's Lay on Hands, which is a static number and you know how much you're going to get. You're obviously subject to rolling here. But if I were your DM, I would probably work with you to either give you options or maybe give you a magic item or something that will allow you to maybe re-roll some of those dice. Maybe something that lets you add your Constitution modifier to the dice that you roll, which would be pretty wild. It is dice from a pool. It's not considered hit dice because there are some magic items I think that increase the amount you roll when you roll hit dice. Unfortunately, it doesn't tap into this. I think the one of the periaptive wound closure I think doubles the amount you get. I would probably allow it to apply to this potentially if you were to get something like that. I also might be willing to allow you to do this to heal an ally as well, which would be kind of cool to give you like a, if you wanted to spend it. Maybe you don't get it at level 3, maybe at level 3 it's just for yourself, but maybe at higher levels you could use it to heal allies as well. And again, you don't have to spend all of the dice in the pool at once. Obviously, if you need a big heal, you could do that, but you can obviously spend them piecemeal as need be. At level 6, you get Fanatical Focus. Once per rage, if you fail a saving throw, you can re-roll that with a bonus equal to your rage damage bonus, and you must use the new roll. That is so pitiful. Equal to your rage damage bonus. Okay. I mean, it's a re-roll of a failed saving throw, right? Which is great. We're not going to argue with that's great. And hey, you are getting a bonus to it, in fact, which is a +2 to a +4 to that roll. So the chances of you succeeding have increased. And again, it's once per active rage. So you have, as we know, much higher levels, 5 or more rages. So once per active rage, you fail a saving throw. Hey, freebie reroll, no issues here. With a bonus equal to your rage damage bonus, which again, hey, it's +2 to +4, so nothing crazy. It does pale in comparison to something like the Fighter's Indomitable, which now they get to add their whole fighter level, but it is not, a long rest thing. It is once per rage, so hey, they didn't have to give you any bonus to it, so I guess I should really look a gift horse in the mouth on that one. Zealous Presence at level 10. As a bonus action, you unleash a battle cry infused with divine energy. Up to 10 creatures of your choice within 60 feet of you gain advantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the start of your next turn. Once you use this feature, you can't use it until you finish a long rest unless you expend a rage to restore that use. Again, nice that they're giving you the opportunity to use it more than once by just expending a rage. I would also do the same thing I was talking about with Intimidating Presence up here, where you would use language something like, where is it? When you activate your rage. Oh, yeah. When you activate your rage and as a bonus action, or as a bonus action while your rage is active, or maybe not even that, you say something along the lines of, when you activate your rage or as a bonus action on your turn, you unleash a battle cry, right? So this could be, again, similar concept to you kind of entering into this super powerful rage as a berserker, intimidating folks, you entering into a rage and kind of inspiring your allies with your zealous presence. I'm liking the opportunity of you to be able to use it as part of your rage bonus action, or if it's not beneficial to you, in that moment, maybe because some people have advantage from some other thing, or, you're just more spread out, you use it as a bonus action later, but like you have the opportunity to save the action economy by having it when you activate your rage. But all in all, the ability to burn rages to get it back if you need it is pretty powerful. And lastly, Rage of the Gods at level 14. This form lasts for 1 minute or until you drop to 0 hit points. When you activate your rage, you can assume this form if you want. It is once per long rest, no way to extend that. What happens when you activate it? You have a fly speed equal to your speed and you can hover. You have resistance to necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage. And when a creature within 30 feet of you would drop to 0 hit points, you could take a reaction to expend a use of your rage to instead change the target's hit point to a number equal to your barbarian level. This I don't love as much as like I want to love it, but it like, okay. So I activate my rage, it's part of my rage. For a minute, I can fly. That's great. I mean, you might have by level 14 a magic item or something that might allow you to fly. So, there are a lot of lower level items that could give you the ability to fly. Resistance to necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage. Those are again hard to get resistances to. And that's in addition to your rage's bludgeoning, piercing, slashing resistance. And then again, whenever a creature within 30 feet of you would drop to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to give them, at this point, 14 hit points. Hey, that's great. And it's when they would go to 0, you can raise them up instead so they don't actually do hit 0. When they would, you pop them up to your barbarian level, which again, 14 to potentially 20 hit points could be a big difference, right? Especially if it's like death by 1,000 cuts and small tick damage. 20 HP, 14 to 20 HP could be a big shift. Let's go ahead and real quick take a look at the Path of the Zealot level 14 feature, which was previously, while you're raging, having 0 hit points doesn't knock you unconscious. You must still make death saving throws and suffer the normal effects of taking damage while at 0 hit points. However, if you would die due to failing death saving throws, you don't die until your rage ends. You only die if you still have 0 hit points. I really liked that. I thought that that was really cool because it's like I can just keep raging beyond death and just keep going. And as long as somebody gets a chance to heal me before my rage ends, then I'm back in the fight. I thought that was a really cool concept. I'm actually kind of bummed to not see that appear in some form here. Another thing I really liked about the Zealot Barbarian that I think a lot of people also liked was if a spell such as Raise Dead has the sole effect of restoring you to from death, you don't need any material components for it. Like you're just good to come back. Um, yeah, I liked that concept. That's like I probably would add that back in. It's such a niche thing that it doesn't necessarily warrant having the healing is great. Having the ability that if you die, you don't have to worry about, material components to bring you back from being dead. That is such a niche thing that like why make that a whole ability for you? Like you hopefully you never have to use it. I'd still tack that one in because I kind of like that one. And then Rage of the Gods just feels weird. I liked the concept of you being able to just like push yourself because you're in such like a fanatical state. You can just keep pushing yourself past death. Well, why isn't he dying? And it's just like you're the divine emissary of whatever deity you're the zealot for, or whatever entity you're the zealot for. You are just pushing past any sort of known limits. You're just kind of crushing through this by being able to survive at 0 hit points. Also, I might have the revivification ability here that, when a creature would go to 0, they go to an amount equal to your barbarian level. I might make it twice your barbarian level, so it's kind of like you're essentially using your version of relentless rage, but for them, so it's twice your barbarian level to maybe give them a little bit more chance of surviving another turn. But I don't know. I'd say out of all of them, I mean, honestly, they're all pretty good. They have all had a decent amount of glow ups here. I mean, you really can't go wrong with any of these base classes. Obviously, things might get a little interesting if you start trying to tap into the older ones. Again, I'm playing in a game where somebody is playing Path of the Giant Barbarian, and we're basically just taking it at face value as it is because a lot of the stuff this was also made much later in the time frame, so it's more geared towards how 2024 like classes were designed. Um, but yeah, most of this stuff doesn't impact or change one way or another with the updates to the Barbarian. So I would say Path of the Giant, you could probably easily switch over with little to minimal changes at all. I'll have to go back in and look at some of these other ones like Ancestral Guardian, Storm Herald, and Wild Magic, and Beast, I guess too, and see like how much of them need updates. If you guys are interested in that, maybe we'll make a future video and talk about going back to look at some of the subclasses that didn't make it. Because who knows, they might show up in a future book like the Forgotten Realms book. I'd love to see Path of the Battle Rager make a comeback. I obviously did my own homebrew of that. Some of that stuff might need to change based on the 2024 rules. But yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. Like I said, I think I've come around on Path of the World Tree. I was really kind of against it. I still think Path of the Zealot is one of my favorites because I kind of like playing characters with a divine connection, and like this is kind of cool to have that divine connection as a barbarian. I do think we need a little bit of tweaks. Rage of the Gods is good, but like I said, fly speed at level 14, boots of flying are, I think, uncommon magic items or maybe rare magic items. You probably should have encountered something like that by the time you hit level 14, so that's not as big. The 3 resistances is very nice and potentially reactionary, kind of almost Death Ward with a little bit of extra. Granted, you only have 1 reaction per turn, and you can only do this whole form once per long rest. Whereas the previous Path of the Zealots, Rage Beyond Death, this just happened all the time. You could keep raging beyond death at 0 hit points with no issues as long as you had the opportunity to do so, right? You still make death saving throws, so even if people attack you and deal damage to you on your turn, you are still making death saving throws. Oh no, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, suffer the normal effects of taking damage while at 0 hit points. So you could still get killed outright while you're at 0 hit points, right? Somebody could hit you and then crit you, and then you take 2 failed death saving throws. So you can still die while you're upright fighting, but you have quite literally a better fighting chance in that aspect. Or if somehow you could use revivification, it would work on you as well, because you don't really have any. You have obviously Warrior of the Gods to give yourself a little bit of extra healing, but there's something about that kind of power fantasy of like, no, I'm not dead yet. I'm still in it. Which I guess some of that, maybe part of the reason why they didn't do Rage Beyond Death is because of the fact that you have as part of your base feature, what is it? Relentless Rage, which really, if you think about it, with Relentless Rage and Rage Beyond Death, you'd be almost nigh unkillable. You have a chance to just keep staying in the fight with Relentless Rage. Maybe that's why they changed it, because you have that, plus you have the opportunity to maybe heal yourself with Warrior of the God. But you could be like this, and then like, oh, I finally failed my Relentless Rage save. Guess what? Rage Beyond Death, and we're still in it. We're still going. That sounds pretty fucking cool to me, to be able to just be like, I'm not dead yet. Oh, I failed my Relentless Rage. Guess what? Rage Beyond Death. We're going. That is the zealot, the fanatic fantasy, power fantasy that I would like to try to live in like a barbarian. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Which one is your favorite of the barbarian subclasses here in 2024? And on top of that, which of the 2014 barbarian subclasses would you like to see come back the most and get updated and get the 2024 treatment? Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.